Compulsive behavior. I'm not sure really what that means, but I assume it means a repetitive, habitual habit pattern. Uh, so at least in the recovery sense, at least how it's worked for me, I don't try to manipulate the pattern, let's say. So there can be a thought pattern, let's just for an example, that's very repetitive. I tried to change that for a long time. Manipulating the mental system, or as they would say in recovery, self. Um, I attempted that. It's sort of like the self help approach in many ways. That didn't work for me because I wasn't seeing that really the movement in recovery is a loss of faith in self. Um, a loss of faith in the one who those habits are moving to. So let's see. A repetitive behavior pattern would only one have a lot of weight if it's yours. Yeah. So the word my, that pattern being your pattern is why it has a lot of weight. If I had a repetitive mental pattern or habit pattern, it wouldn't be affecting you, yeah? But yours is seen to be yours because it's happening, seemingly happening inside this body, and all those thoughts and movements are preceded. Uh, Actually, the thought my comes after, but when your head says me or my, it puts it before all the patterns. So constant mental patterns happening. Let's say there's some which are very repetitive. So I know what you're talking about. I know what you mean. But it's the idea that those are yours. Yeah. So those mental patterns, or let's say repetitive behavior patterns, those are of self. I tried to change that for a long time. Now, changing self would be based on the idea that I'm doing it and I am that. Yeah? That you are the mental system, let's say, or self. Wanting to change it would be based completely on the idea that you're doing it and that you are it. But self is a conditioned thing. So you can hear the head all day going on. That's why you can say that that's happening to me, yeah? So it's the idea that those patterns are your patterns, that you're the doer of them, and therefore you're going to try to stop them. All of that makes those patterns spin even faster. Yeah? So it's based on the ownership of those patterns. Now you can hear those mental patterns. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to tell me about them. And you can also hear your head say me. So the investigation from a sound meditation idea, or let's say enquiry idea, is what is hearing those patterns. And more importantly, what is hearing the idea of me, which is claiming to own those patterns. Because it's the ownership of the habitual pattern. That's why people say my brain is killing me, or this is driving me crazy. It's not the pattern, it's the idea or the presentation that it's your mental pattern. You're not doing that compulsive habit. It's by listening to it as it that it gets tons of life. And then from that standpoint, we want to change it. Then we want to change it, yeah? Mm. This is like, this is why I feel the listening stuff is very important. Because I've had quite a few friends take their own lives, and it's based on stuff like this. There's a compulsive habit pattern going on in their head. They can't seem to get out of it as it. Yeah? But they are hearing that compulsive habit pattern. So you're hearing the repetitive thoughts. You know very well that they're repetitive because you're telling me about them right now, yeah? The thing that we often don't see is the thought mind, or the sense of individuality, which claims that those ideas are yours. In that, you're bound to them, yeah? You're bound to them. But the point of the whole thing is you can hear both the habit pattern and you can hear your head say, those are mine. So what's hearing that? There must be something before, which is ever changing. Or sorry, which is never changing, which is noticing the ever changing. So you could put the repetitive habit pattern under the, if you were looking at it from the recovery sense, under the header of self, and you are not self. Yeah? Nor are you doing self, nor are you going to change self. Yeah, the mental system might change a bit, but the baseline of it and the core beliefs are not going to change very much. Yeah? So, you are not that movement is the most important thing, I feel. And for me, you can hear that movement happening. Probably all day long, actually. Yeah? And because you're like me, bro, you're super self-centered. So that movement, the repetitive habit pattern, and the thought that it's mine are flying around each other, yeah? Because it's super self-centered. You want out of that, which is completely understandable that you want out of that. But it's losing faith in the whole thing, of it being your mental pattern, yeah? You're not doing that. The habit pattern and repetition is happening for sure. That's an event that's taking place. And then there's another event taking place, which is part of self, which says, I'm doing this, and that's my mental pattern. Yeah. So we lose faith in that. We move that faith over to something else. But the basis of the movement of faith, if you can stop listening to something, you must not be what you're not listening to. Obviously, yeah? That would be very clear. If you have some stuff you want to add on here, Matt, or ask a more question, put it in the thing. Because I don't know if this stuff is clear to anybody else. It's just what's coming out of the head here. Yeah? Or coming through the pipe, let's say. And then the other part from recovery is just go do service. Because sometimes those habit patterns get so compulsive and repetitive, you just got to go do something else. It's just like, you just go do something else, and that pattern will break. Because those repetitive habit patterns in the mental, they present as super thick, strong things, but they snap very easily, you know? They snap pretty easy, and service is the best way to snap them. So, do whatever. If you got kids or something, go play with the kid for half an hour, and you won't even remember what you were thinking about. The mental patterns present as huge because they're based as mine, and when the head is very self-centered system, so it really indulges in that. And yeah, when you're in the dust of it, it's not a good time to philosophize or try to spiritualize yourself out of it. You just use the program and pray or do service, you know, and then the habit pattern of the mental will snap. It's not a thick thing. These mental patterns are thin. They break easy. Yeah. It's yeah. But the basis of the whole thing to me is you are not self. Yeah, so you can hear self all day. And part of self is that these ideas are mine, yeah? And then based on that, the same you who has claimed the ideas wants to get out of them. But that's all one thing called self in recovery. And self can't get out of self. That won't happen that way. Yeah. I just saw this Bodhidharma thing that might. So Bodhidharma's a dude who was in India and then walked to China, I guess, and then that's where Chan Buddhism comes from. Chan is like Zen before it went to Japan. Chan Buddhism, yeah. The Chan stuff really resonates with me, and they have methods of listening meditation, which I've done a lot, but they have methods of listening enquiry, which I feel really break the back. But Bodhidharma says this: if you seek direct understanding, which is essentially what we're all seeking, yeah, let's say peace or something. Oh, there's some other stuff here. Yeah, advice how to deal with difficult people. I don't know. You go to a therapist, maybe. Although maybe they'll be difficult too. I don't know, but watch. Just be careful who you take advice from, is what I would say. Especially on platforms like this, where anybody can come in and talk. Just be careful on that. Who you take advice from. Yeah. All right. Bodhidharma. If you seek direct understanding, which is like, to me, peace. Yeah? If you seek your own nature, which is peace, existence, consciousness, bliss, then he says this: don't hold on to any appearance whatsoever and you'll succeed. And then he says, I have no other advice. That's from Bodhidharma, which is a pretty, he's a pretty big dude in the whole thing. In the whole world of Buddhism. So don't hold on to any appearance whatsoever and you'll succeed. All right. So let's just go back to that example you were saying, bro. Form, in the Buddhist sense, is anything that you're, like sound is form. So it's not just what you can see, yeah? But sound is also form. So you hear the sound of my voice, that's considered form. Thoughts are also forms. So he is saying, just so I get the language right here, don't hold on to any appearance. So when he says appearance, he's talking about forms, yeah? So now he's talking about, let's say, the approach of Chan Buddhism. Don't hold on to any appearance. Talopa from India said, have a mind that's open to everything and attached to nothing. Now, in order to do that, you also have to not hold on to the mind, because the mental system is attaching and will attach and label everything, yeah, because the mental system is one of the appearances which you do not touch. So when Talopa says have a mind which is attached to nothing and open to everything, he's saying big M mind. And in Chan Buddhism, big M mind is considered like your Buddha nature. So, yeah. So the big M mind is like considered your Buddha nature, yeah? So Bodhidharma says don't attach to any appearance. So what you're talking about as a repetitive pattern is an appearance, yeah? Thought forms, let's say. Now there's another form which is at the base of that, which in the 25 or 26 tattvas they would call the ahankara, which is the me, I, me, my thought. Yeah. Now that I, me, my thought is also a form. It presents as a separate individual thing, but it's not. So all of those patterns which are driving you crazy, the ahankara is focused on the you, not the patterns. Yeah. So this is another appearance that you don't grasp. And then of course the body is an appearance. So you don't grasp at this. This is like the negation of Buddhism. Negation being the main movement that works, I feel. Because you already are the peace that you're looking for. So that's done. Yeah? Big M mind or Buddha nature. that is already what you are. So it's more about non-grasping or opening the hand on what you're taking yourself to be, and you can only land in the infinite. Yeah. So Bodhidharma keeps it very simple. He says, don't hold on to any appearance whatsoever, and you'll succeed. So you can see any form that pops up as not that. Because for people who are in recovery, any form that pops up in this situation, that's self, yeah? And self-reliance will fail you. And you can't be more reliant on something than calling it you. Yeah. So self you're not that self. That's not where you start. Yeah. So in that case, you can negate that as what you are. And then you would see that what's happening in the mental system with those repetitive movements. Bodhidharma has another one here. He says, to see form but not be corrupted by form, and to hear sound and not be corrupted by sound is liberation. When he says corrupted, he means grasping at sound. Yeah. So when you hear this talk, for instance, the sound forms go in your ears. The ears themselves are like open gates, yeah? So the ears themselves are just like open doors. So obviously, he would say to not be corrupted by sound would be to not attach to that sound. But when the sound goes in your head, the mental system then starts to label and distinguish what that sound means. Now, when it does that, it's doing that based on its own past conditioning. So the words come out of here, they go into here, and then your head meets them, and they get painted in mat or nay. Yeah? In that case. So now the mental system is painting these words. Yeah? So to not be corrupted by sound would also to not be corrupted by the sound of your own thinking mind. Your own discernment, let's say, or your own, no, it's not discernment, it's not the right word, but the mental movement, for lack of a better thing. And then it says, ears that aren't attached to sound are the gates of Zen. Yeah. So to not grasp onto the sound of the words coming through, to not grasp onto the mental system, which is labeling and trying to understand those. Because that mental system can only see one way. In this case, it only sees Jay's way. In that case, it only sees Matt's way and Nay's way. And when the mental system fires and presents its tricks or its ideas and concepts, there's nothing wrong with it, but if they're taken to be mine, then they become very heavy. Yeah? Thoughts are no different than the sound of a bird going through your head, but it's the my. So when you hear the sound of a bird, your head says bird, yeah? But because of that, you don't worry about the sound of the bird. When your head talks, it says my. And all of a sudden, these sounds are very influential to the point where they'll drive somebody insane. So it comes down to really learning how to listen and not grasp on to what is heard. I feel, at least in my experience, that is recovery, really. It starts when you go into the rooms and you have to, for once, listen to somebody else and let them direct your life for a little while. Because the mental system, if it's listened to, will derail your life if you're in recovery, yeah. So the first listening is to somebody else. Yeah. And then that opens up this idea of maybe I shouldn't be listening to my own head, yeah? Because things seem to go better when I listen to somebody else. And then when you stop listening, or let's say obeying your own head, you sit back into the listening without the two, yeah? And there's a big space there. And then you'll see that when your head says me, these are my ideas and my life, that is the self-centeredness, you'll see that there is no me there. You can't put me in my hand, yeah? Because it's an idea. It's just a thought form. It's like you and me are ideas in many ways. And then all the other thoughts are based on that idea. But you're not the idea. You're the open space of listening, which is before that idea. And in that not seat, the seat of being everywhere, those ideas can't touch what you are, really. They keep going because they're conditioned, yeah. But the more you lose faith in them, the quieter they will get, because you'll see that who they arise to or who they're talking to isn't there in many ways. It's like when my head would ramble on that everything was my fault, or let's say an event happened, my head would pose me as the one who's at fault. Those thoughts, yeah? Now I would listen to those thoughts based on that they were my thoughts and they were about me. But through the investigation of who's listening to those thoughts, it always comes back to the thought or the idea me. Yeah? And then if you look for that me inside of this structure we call body, you don't find nothing. It's just an idea, yeah? So it's like the mental system is talking about itself. And you don't have to grab onto that. You are the open listening, which is before even the idea me. It's like Nisargadatta said, before there's any thoughts, you exist. So it's really a matter of listening and not grasping onto what is heard. What is heard is self, if you're in recovery, small s self. That's what is heard, yeah? Now the big M mind that Talopa talks about, have a mind that's open to everything and attached to nothing, you are already that mind. So it would just become a non-grasping at what's heard, and you can only land in the big M mind. Or the infinite if you're in recovery. If you stop putting faith in the finite and you put it in the infinite, you can only land in the infinite. Because you stop grabbing at the finite, there's only one place to go, which is the infinite, yeah? And then if you really want to trip out, what is being heard only has existence because of the hearing, because hearing is existence itself. So Jay thinks that it's a self-existent thing, yeah? I think that I'm a self-existent thing, as far as a thought goes, or the idea me. But this brain and body only get life from what's hearing it, which would be existence itself. So it comes down, if you're listening to the thoughts as your thoughts, then yes, they will be completely repetitive, habitual patterns. And that will get people to the point where they're going to use or they're going to try to end this situation called body. Because those thoughts taken to be my thoughts, the repetition of them will drive anybody crazy. But the point is, you can hear those thoughts. And then if you say, well, who's listening to those thoughts? The answer is me. Something is aware of that me. There's something which is ever present, which is there before the me thought and after the me thought. An ever present me. Yeah. So if you stay in the listening, you don't have to grasp at what's heard. So this is like the enquiry in many ways. Who's hearing the thoughts? I am. Try to find that I in this situation. But the point is, you can hear that I thought. So there must be a hearing of it. What is being heard is not what is hearing. Or Hong Po and Nisargadatta said, what is being perceived is not what is perceiving. So as soon as you can perceive that repetitive mental pattern, and your head goes, this is killing me, which is also perceived, that's all self. Yeah, you're not doing that. You're not doing that to yourself. It's a habit. It's like a mechanical movement of a conditioned past presenting now. You're not doing that, yeah? A great relief. A great relief. All right, if there's any questions, feel free to put them in the thing. I see some people wrote some stuff, so. Spiritual system, okay. How to surrender fully. Oh. Well, self won't surrender fully. So to me, it's like in recovery, you admit you can't do it, essentially. So in my experience in recovery is like, I can't do it on my own. So that's quite a surrender. But that in spiritual practice is probably not much different. But you could read some Ramana. He talks about surrender. He probably talks about it in the Indian sense of surrendering to a deity or something, or surrendering to the big M mind, let's say. But self will not surrender. I feel there's faith taken out of self, and in that there's a surrendering, but self won't really surrender. J is not going to surrender, let's say. Yeah. J is just neutralized and turned down enough. At least that's how I would see it today, yeah. So the question is, who wants to surrender? The answer is going to be me. That me thought is not going to surrender. It's not going to just fold over, yeah? Because it's self-centered system. So who wants to surrender? Me. Well, you're not that thought me. So when that thought me makes a move, like I need to do all of this, or this is happening and I'm going crazy and this, this is why I stay on the inquiry. Who's hearing that mental system? It comes back to that me, yeah? You're not that me. So when it tries to make a move, you see it or you hear it from before it. But don't expect the me thought to surrender to a higher power. That's never happened, I feel. The me thought thinks it's God, yeah? So it's not going to surrender to another type of God. You quit the me thought. You quit living as the thought me. And it will continue on in its own way. But it will be right-sized, which is a much more comfortable place. It's like Jay will never admit that he's not managerial quality. I know Jay is not managerial quality from before Jay. What's hearing Jay knows that Jay's not managerial quality. But Jay still thinks he's manager. Yeah? So when it's known that Jay's not managerial quality, Jay's put into right size, and then things go a lot better. So who wants to surrender? Well, I want to surrender. That's the same I thought that has us running around after all the other thoughts. So it's not going to surrender. You can hear the thought me. That's the point. There's a hearing of that thought me already. So when it tries to make a move, surrender, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, for instance, when the I thought tries to make a move, you don't go with it. You trust that there's some higher thing, for instance, if it's like the recovery program, that's going to take care of things if you don't just make every move as the head makes a jump. At least that's how I see it. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. But that's what's worked for me. And then the self will keep making the jump. The intention to surrender seems to reinforce quite the opposite. In a way, yeah. The intention to surrender, that's why they have the inquiry. Who's trying to surrender? I am. Yeah. So you can see the head trying to make another move. But one of the big misunderstandings is that if you do that enough, then the head's just going to stop forever. That's not the case here. The surrender is so you see that you're not the movement, but the movement keeps moving. Yeah? I don't know how else to put that. The movement keeps going. Self keeps moving. You've just surrendered that self is God, essentially. That's what gets surrendered. And then you stop grasping at it. That's why Bodhidharma says don't grasp at what's moving. Form. Yeah? But the movement keeps moving. There's not a day when your mental system is going to stop permanently. There is a day, and that will be the day that this body is dead. So you won't care about any of this stuff at that point because you'll be dead. But before that day, that's not going to happen because that's not its nature. The nature of the mental system is to move. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it presents a lot of times as if it's God, and it's not. And when it's grasped onto and lived as, that false God causes a lot of problems because it's not God. Yeah. So it's really surrendering to me is surrendering that you are that mental movement, that's where you start. But don't expect the mental movement to disappear and stop permanently forever. That will happen the day that the body dies. Yeah, because the brain and the body come and go together. You do not come and go. So surrendering the identification with self, that to me is the surrender. Yeah. And then that you stay in the listening rather than grasping onto what's listened to. Like if you read the Bhagavad Gita or something like that, it's all about this quieting, taking methods to quiet self down enough that you see you're not that movement of self-centeredness. Yeah? That's why Bodhidharma says, have eyes when you're, what's he say, corrupt, I think is the word. To see form and not be corrupted by form, and to hear sound and not be corrupted by sound is liberation itself. That's what he's saying, yeah? And then the one before that said, if you seek direct understanding, don't hold on to any appearance. So when the mental system is an appearance, and it's selling you all kinds of products, one of those products being the main one, which is the idea me, or you, yeah? He's saying you can hear all of that, so don't grasp onto that. You can hear the body, you can hear the senses through sensation. Yeah? So these are all forms. Don't grasp onto those forms. He doesn't say that all the forms are going to stop moving. But he's saying you don't get corrupted by not grasping on. So that to me is the same as surrender. That to me is the exact same thing as surrender. But oftentimes it takes a trust, like in recovery, there's a higher power. So that when we surrender and we don't go with the self-centeredness, we trust that something higher, yeah? Mm-hmm. Who would stop the grasping? Well, that's a good question. You should put that question into practice rather than just mental ideation, yeah? Search for the one who's not grasping. There is no one who's not grasping, yeah? There's the presentation of the thought me who is grasping at the other thoughts. Mm-hmm. This is why Huang Po says you keep both hands open. Because there's a grasping at the thoughts, and then there's also a grasping at the thought that I'm not grasping. But if you keep that as a mental understanding, it couldn't be more useless. As a mental understanding, that is completely useless because it's just mental grasping. Yeah? That's why I do sound meditations on here like every single day. So that people can investigate these things through practice. I don't think anybody does, probably, but that's why we do it. Yeah. So it always comes back to the thought me or I. You can hear from before it when your head says me or I. And it's almost vertical, and that me or I thought actually starts quite low in the torso. It's not up here. This is like an after effect. Yeah. All right. If there's any other questions, feel free to put them in the thing there. Seems to create a non-grasping self. Well, then you go right back to the inquiry. Who is the non-grasping self? You're back to the me thought, yeah? Don't touch the mind. I like that. Ganga Meera says that, and it kind of like resonates through the listening stuff. She says don't touch the mind, so whatever it presents. Don't touch. It's like a hot stove in many ways, yeah? So this questioning that you're asking can be a continuous loop. I don't have any interest in that loop, thankfully, because the loop doesn't get out of itself. So that you either put the inquiry into effect or you don't. But if it just becomes a constant mental understanding, it doesn't work. It's like 12-step recovery as a mental understanding is useless. You have to go to meetings and do the steps. Yeah, this is the thing. This is one of the pitfalls or challenges of satsang in many ways. We don't do this in order for you to sit there and try to create some mental logic about this. Yeah, the one who is asking the question, you can hear that, so you're not that. That's essentially the whole thing. Or in recovery is cool because it keeps it simple. All of the forms that you're aware of as far as this is concerned, that is self and you are not self, so lose faith in it. So when your head comes up with the next question, the only question that you should ask internally is who's asking that question? Or who's hearing my mind ask all these questions? I am. Well, that I is not what you are. That's not where you start. Yeah, that's the whole thing to me. That's why I like listening so much, because it's super direct. Whatever is heard, you're not that. You can hear the body, you can hear the head, you can hear the me thought. You are not that. That is not where you start. That's why Bodhidharma keeps things so direct. He says, don't hold on to any appearance whatsoever and you will succeed. So if you sit down, you start listening, your head will start labeling things. You don't hold on to any appearance, because what is heard is not what is hearing. Done deal. Yeah? Then when your head goes, well, what about this? You can hear that. So the deal stays done. And then that goes along all day long. And then the thought patterns might be repetitive, they might be obsessive, they might be this. And then your head will go, those are my thought patterns, this is all about me. You can hear all of that. Yeah? And then eventually you just keep both hands open, like Huang Po says. And you don't mess with any of it, because you see that it's all conditioned. And then it goes on. Yeah? So the body and the brain keep moving through life. You go to your job, you do what you do, you eat your food, you like what you like, you hate what you hate. And the whole time you're both hands open, hearing the event take place. Yeah? And then from the standpoint of from before it, that body can be led into what it needs to be in. This one is alcoholic, so it goes to AA. Yeah. But I like to keep it very direct. Very direct. When your head is thinking up the next question, you can hear that. So you're not that. And then that will continue on. There's no day when you and I get this. Jay does not become open listening ever liberated. What you and I are is already open listening ever liberated, yeah? Mm. The keeping it simple, I feel, is very important. That's why Bodhidharma writes these things so quick or so direct. See form, don't be corrupted by form. So don't grasp on to any sight. Yeah? To hear sound but not be corrupted is to be liberated. Sound comes in the ears, the brain goes off about that sound, trying to understand it. I'm not going to grasp at the sound nor the brain. That will probably take practice to do that, because it's a very habitual movement. So you'd have to sit down and actually do the thing, yeah? And then you ask, well, who is listening to that mental system? And then your head will present the false god called me. And when that happens, you can hear that as well. So that's another thing you don't grasp at. And then you might get kind of a sense of openness, both inside and outside the body, which seems to be aware of this whole situation called body-mind world. And that body-mind situation in recovery is called self. And a loss of faith in that self will give this life a lot of freedom, because self is really what's distorting things in many ways. Not in a terrible way all the time. It can get terrible for sure. But it's distorting things all the time by labeling everything, giving it meaning. Yeah. There's no other answer. There's no the whole thing about self-help and Jay becoming something great, that all failed. That failed. Where I start not being Jay, that is a real solution. That is a solution. Yeah. Recovery, the big book, and Advaita and Chan, to me, that is a solution. Non-grasping. Based on the identification as being something. Or not being something. That works. And then Jay gets put right size without me doing anything. Yeah. That's good. All right. So any questions or things we want to wrap up with, feel free to put them in there, or we can call it a day on that. When it comes to the listening stuff, it's something that gets refined. I don't believe really in not practicing. Most people, like 99.9% of human beings, need method to calm the system down, to relax, learn how to relax the body, so that the listening can become refined. I think satsang is super useful, but I think practice is necessary. I'm not one of the people who say, oh, you don't have to do anything. The body and the mind need to be settled and turned down volume-wise in order for the listening to get more and more subtle. Yeah. So for me, satsang and recovery help a lot, but just coming to satsang and working with ideas don't do it, to me. There has to be a method of practice which is settling the whole thing, so that the message can land or cut through, let's say. And listening, to me, is the best method for that. I just want to mention that because I've seen a lot in the whole non-duality thing where people are like, you don't do anything. And the thing is, you're not doing all the doing of the body and the mind in the first place. You're not doing that. So the volume of that needs to be turned down in order to see through it, let's say. If it's too loud, it's not going to work. I feel most people, it's like Rinzai said, you already are the peace you're looking for. This isn't exactly what he said, but he said your nature is already the Buddha nature, so you're better just spending your time calming down. That's Rinzai. There's a whole school of Zen Buddhism named after that guy. So he obviously had some insight into something, yeah. But he's essentially saying you should spend your time calming down. Because the message is the message. Yeah. So to me, the method is listening. That's why we come back on here in a few hours and we do that for at least an hour. Listen to sound. When the mind goes off, you don't grasp at it. You just let the sound come into the ears and you stay on the method. Yeah. So if you're interested in quick fix non-duality, that's not going to happen here. Somebody else might sell it, but I'm a big believer in practice and keeping the mind and the body calm. The volume needs to be turned down in order for the message to cut through that noise. And listening to me is the best way. So, message with practice and one day at a time. All right, so if there's anything you want to add on, please feel free to put it in the chat. I don't even know if there's anybody left here or not.